As a kid, what's the creepiest, most WTF thing you ever noticed about another kid's family? When I was in 1st or 2nd grade, I was at a friend's house and forgot to turn off the lights when I left the bathroom. My friend's dad lost his crap. He cussed me out, made me stand in a corner, and wouldn't let me leave until I wrote "I will not forget to turn off the lights when I leave a room" 100 or so times. It was my first and last time going to that friend's house. I noticed that all of the rooms in this kid's house could only be locked from the outside of the room. I thought that only existed in horror movies. I didn't know until I was 17 that the fact that my parents installed a lock on my bedroom that could only be opened from the outside was unusual. Not really creepy, but definitely WTF worthy. I was friends with a girl growing up and she didn't come from a very clean home. All the time there were clothes in huge piles all over her bathroom floor. Okay, whatever. But for some unknown reason no one in her family ever flushed the toilet. They would sit, crap, and just go on with their life. Every once in a while when the bowl got too full, someone would just try to flush, thus resulting in week old crap and pee pouring out in the floor all over this laundry. 9 times out of 10 they would kick around these clothes then just leave the scene. They constantly bought new clothes. The worst thing, this was all just completely normal to them. If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, just let that mellow, too. This one has a happy ending. My dad was a contractor and I made friends with one of his employees' sons because we'd always end up on the job site with our dads. The first time I slept over at his house I got there after dark. The house was a giant 1-room log cabin. The kid had like 5 siblings and all their bedrooms were just sectioned off with walls made of clotheslines and sheets. Even the bathroom didn't have walls. It was just this massive structure with a maze of hanging sheets everywhere. It made me really uncomfortable that night. Fast forward to the next morning when we go outside to play. We walk out the back door and there's a giant mansion in the backyard. Actually it was more like this cabin was in the front yard of a mansion. Turns out the dad had bought the land and built a cabin for the family to live in temporarily while he built their dream home. He gave every member of the family some awesome feature in their new room and it remains one of the coolest, most unique homes I've ever been in. We're all still friends to this day and I would describe them as the most loving family that I know. When I was about 12-13, I had this friend who lived in a house with her mother and 4 other sisters. One day I went to her place while on my period and ended up using her washroom to change my tampon. I put the used one in the garbage can, which had a lid, completely wrapped up in toilet paper. Later in the night, right before dinner, we're all sitting at the table waiting for their mother, when we suddenly all hear her screaming from the bathroom, "WHO has their period? WHO used a tampon." She came rushing down and all the sisters denied having theirs. I ended up sheepishly coming clean. To which she said, "And your mother lets you use tampons? Don't you know what that does to your body?" She then proceeded to make a whole dinner conversation out of why tampons are horrible for me and why they've ruined my purity forever and bragged about how her daughters would never use anything so primitive. Needless to say, I never went there ever again. I thought it was so weird and WTF why, because the only way she would have seen my used tampon is if she had actually gone through the garbage looking for something incriminating. The thing is, that's totally something this woman would do, to try and find something to yell at her daughters about. I feel so bad for people who grow up with such controlling, monstrous parents. Shudder. Neighbor kid took out a stick of butter and started dipping it into a canister of Kool-Aid. After licking all the mix off the butter, he repeated it over and over as if it was that fun dip candy. It skeeved me out and I declined his generosity when he offered me the Kool-Aid and the butter. His older sisters were there and they said they do this all the time. It's great. Dear God, that sounds like some sort of honey boo boo delicacy. Went to a friend's house and could hardly breathe when I stepped through the front door. They had like 20 dogs, cats, and would just let them pee and crap anywhere in the house. The smell of ammonia was so strong I could barely breathe. It was so bad that all the floorboards were just soaked with urine and were rotted. I run into this often when going into customers' homes. Source: Cable Guy. I used to hang out with a kid whose family not only didn't have a litter box for the cat but wouldn't pick up the cat crap either. The only reason I went over there was because he had an Atari 2600. I always came home with cat crap on the bottom of my shoes. Doesn't matter, played Atari. So this isn't nearly as WTF as other stories on this thread, but I always find it really sad that my neighbor's dad sat on his lawnmower from dawn to dusk so he didn't have to deal with his family. And now you know why some super old dudes don't retire, ever. I grew up down the street from this family of 4. Mom, dad, son that was my age, and adopted son that was like 6 years younger than us. The son my age was pretty quiet and a little odd, but definitely fully functioning, which I feel like I have to mention to understand just how weird this was. One day the mom approached me and asked if I could be a babysitter for them over the summer. Myself and the older son were both around 13 at the time. I assumed the son my age was busy or something and I was to watch his younger brother, but when I got there both of the boys were there. About an hour in I realized I'd been hired to babysit both of them. I would try to make it less weird by making it like the two of us were babysitting his brother together. But then he'd do weird crap like ask if he could play his video games and if he could stay up a bit past his bedtime to finish a movie or something and had address me with Mr. and then my first name. It was just really uncomfortable, especially having class with him once we were back in school. That's one way to give your kid the greatest inferiority complex the world has ever seen. My best friend when I was 12 had a very pretty little sister who was a couple of years younger than us. One time when I was sleeping over at his house we went into his dimly lit basement to get his mother and she was entertaining a couple of creepy looking old men who were drunk and awfully friendly with his sister. They were asking her for kisses and to sit in their laps. His mother looked deeply depressed and I remember feeling so strange and so uncomfortable that I blacked out this memory for decades. I found out a year ago that my friend's sister killed herself at 35 leaving her 9-year-old son without a mother. That is the most fricked up of all on this thread. The parents did lines of coke around the table like it was nothing. I didn't know what the heck was going on but when I asked my mom I wasn't allowed over there anymore. I wonder if some parents did this stuff on purpose. Like, maybe they just really hated having their dumb kids' friends over. So they do something really conspicuously illegal or weird in hopes that the kid will go home and tell their parents. And then, peace and quiet, and see. During primary school I was involved in an out-of-school program that required traveling to another local school. Because my parents worked during the day they arranged for me to be picked up by the mother of one of other children in my class. We went back to their place where I was to wait until my mother came to pick me up. While I was waiting her son picked up a book and his mother turned to him and said, "What have I told you about touching your stepfather's stuff?" She then grabbed him by the ear and pulled him over to his bedroom, shoved him in and locked the bedroom from the outside with a heavy bolt. I can remember hearing him screaming from the other side of the door. I can't remember exactly what she said to me but it was something along the lines of "This is the way it has to be." I told my parents and needless to say I never got a lift home with them again. Also a few months later he was removed from his parents after he set fire to his bedroom. This is the way it has to be. I stayed at this girl's house on a school night for whatever reason, and we all had to take a bath. They told me to go first, but I was playing with this girl's only toy, a globe, and said I'd go last. Little did I know they all used the same freaking bath water. There were like 5 kids and 2 adults. They all 7 of them, took a bath in the same water. I got pushed to the end of the line and when my turn was up, the water was brown. I mean, no longer transparent. I cried and they called my mom and then ran me new bath water. It would appear that they were really poor, but no, her dad was an orthopedic surgeon. WTF. When my friend and I went swimming when we were 9 years old, we changed at the pool. He had no scrotum. I told his mother and she said, "That's okay. We know now." I didn't know much then, but I knew the doctors better fix those undescended testes before puberty. I was a science geek and knew this. He never got them fixed and as an adult, one became cancerous. He's now 48 years old, unmarried and without children. God dang. Stupid parents of his. Okay, I didn't know that was something doctors had to fix. Till, I'll be a better parent now one day maybe. I grew up in a horrible housing estate in London called the Aylesbury Estate. I lived on the 12th floor of a high-rise block. I made friends with a boy called Nicky who was from Grenada and he was black. He lived with his mother and father, or so I thought. I went round his place to play with a new fire engine I bought with birthday money. His house was so strange. Every single light in the house was red, every freaking bulb. His mother's bedroom had a bolt lock on the inside for some reason. I saw his dad for the first time, but something was amiss. He wasn't black. He was 100% white. I was creeped out for a while. I went round his place again the following week and the man he called dad had changed. He was a completely different man and the same happened again and again. Here's where it gets really freaked up. His mother died and he went into care. I scared my mum why he didn't live with his dad. It turns out his mother was a prostitute and had convinced Nikki that his dad was shapeshifter. She convinced her son. His dad was shapeshifter when they were just customers. This was about 40 years ago. I never saw Nikki again, sadly. Sounds like she was trying to protect him the best she could. Sad life making ends meet like that. When I was around 8-9 years old, there was a girl in my neighborhood that hardly anyone ever saw, outside of school. She was maybe a year younger than me. I tried talking to her a few times, and she was very, very shy. She was never allowed at other kids' houses. Reasonable, I guess. There were a lot of questionable people in our town. However, no one was allowed over at her house, either. Not even in her yard or on her driveway. This was because, in her words, her parents didn't like kids. Okay. One friend of ours managed to see into her house a few times. Apparently all the furniture was always covered in plastic, and everything was dark. We went maybe a month without seeing her outside of school, which was normal. One weekend, a friend and I saw her walking down the sidewalk and she told us that her father had died. Her mom told her that he started bleeding from the inside after he ate some cray and she didn't clean up, and that it was her fault for not cleaning well enough. She lived in the same house until after high school. She hardly ever spoke, and when she did, it was just a whisper. She sort of seemed like a small child a lot of the time, with how she acted and pronounced words. If I weren't just a clueless kid then, I probably would have said something to someone. She blamed her father's death on her. Man, that's fricked up. When I was 8, I took a trip for a month to Alabama to visit my friend and his family. His parents were extremely Catholic and had very strong on contraceptives. One day while I was there, we took a family trip to the grocery store and poked holes in condom boxes. I didn't realize what his had done till years later. I still feel really bad about it. TLDR. Friend's family made me poke holes in condoms. So that is why they are locked up behind glass doors at Walgreens. I had a friend in middle high school whose house no one had ever seen the interior of. Whenever we hung out, it was at someone else's house. If me or one of my other friends came by to pick her up to go somewhere, she didn't drive. We were never invited in and had to wait outside until she was ready. My other friends and I were always convinced her parents did some sort of top secret government work or something like that. One of my friends finally did see the inside of her house. After dropping her off and having to pee so bad she threatened to go in the bushes in their yard. Turns out the parents were hoarders and had stacks of papers everywhere, and that's likely why no one was ever allowed inside. Poor girl. That must have been very embarrassing for her. Not really that weird, but I remember my friend's parents used to let my friend eat a 40-pack of Timbits every day. He was super thin, so he was blessed in that sense, but I found it odd. It was almost like a ritual. I remember going to my cousin's house when I was 6 or 7. They were like 8 and 10. I remember thinking it was weird their mom didn't eat with us. She just drank Dr. Peppers and smoked cigarettes. Their dad was nowhere to be found. Anyway, we were up late talking and giggling and whatnot in the middle of the night while we laid down. All of a sudden we hear my uncle hitting my aunt. He then comes in our room stark naked and tells us to shut the frick up. Never went back. I now know she was addicted to M and he was an alcoholic. One of my friend's parents used to give me homework to do. I'd go to her house and her mom would have some math or English assignment that she had come up with for us to do. I had a friend who lived with her mum and her mum's brother. One day I was standing at the bottom of the stairs waiting for my friend to get ready, and the mother and brother were at the top of the stairs behind the banister, making out. I just stood there, and then I heard the mother whisper, "Oh crap, Chris, me, is down there, and they quickly parted ways. I never mentioned any of that to my friend, ever, not even until this day, but I did later find out that it wasn't her mother at all. It was her much older sister, and older brother obviously. Just weird, I don't know. I also had another friend who, at 15 years of age, used to sit naked on her dad's lap. Not me, but my mom had a childhood friend whose father had a glass eye and would throw it in the bathtub with her when she was taking a bath. Holy crap, if I had a glass eye, I would do this to anyone and everyone I could. It would never get old, ever. What is the most strange about many of these stories is the fact that so often it's couples sharing in their weirdness. I want to know how a relationship escalates to that point where both people agree to do this one weird thing together. Surely no one meets another person thinking I bet she also would like to never flush the toilet at home until it overflows. Maybe I should ask her about it. At what point do couples agree on strange behavior? LOL. My next door neighbor, Kevin, and I were buddies because we were the youngest in the neighborhood and no one else would play with us. I would say this was when I was 9 or 10. Anyways, his parents both worked 9-to-5 jobs and I remember them as being very nice but in a forced sort of way. I wasn't allowed to go in their house because they didn't let anyone in. Once I had to go to the bathroom and as we were in his yard he let me in. Every single doorway in the house had a curtain covering it. They made a fake hallway right at the entrance so you couldn't see the living room or the kitchen. I asked him why they were there and he said his parents liked privacy. They also ate nothing but fast food. I remember the first time he had supper at my house he was shocked and kept telling my mom he didn't have to do something like cook a meal for her children. That just because he came over. They moved kind of suddenly when I was around 11 and I remember he couldn't really tell me where they were going or why. He couldn't give me a number or an address to keep in touch and he never called me, so it was sad. Vietnam vet father. The Doberman bit the kid. The father went outside to where the dog was chained up, twisted its neck, buried it on the spot, with the chain still coming up out of the ground attached to the stake. That guy doesn't frick around. In middle school, I was friends with this one kid whose mom had some serious self-esteem and projection issues. I remember one day she picked us up from school because my own mother was ill, and proceeded to ask her son everything he ate that day, not just his packed lunch that she had made him, but snacks and whatnot. When he admitted to buying fries during lunch, she proceeded to scream at him, calling him things like unhealthy pig and almost sobbing at the very idea he might get fat, despite the fact that my friend was literally the most active, physically fit player on the baseball team. If this wasn't awkward enough, she stared me directly in the eye and said, "See Evan, what if you get fat, and the only wife you can find is a girl like her?" I threw my backpack at her. Me and Evan weren't allowed to hang out anymore. Partially for that, partially because I told my mother about his nutcase mom. Went to this kid's house. He wanted to go to a nearby playground. Mom told us we'd have to wait until she was finished with whatever she was doing. 6-7-year-old kid pulls over a chair, stands on it, and slaps his mother straight across the face with force. She is quiet for a second or two, then says, "Okay, get your coat." Went home and thanked my mom for being her for about 12 hours straight. Honestly, the father was probably abusive and taught the kid to be on his side. So mom becomes a slave to both and not listening to the child results in dad's anger. A couple of friends down the street had just moved across country from Georgia to California, and they were different in a lot of ways. The creepiest way, though, was when my friend poured a box of Econo brand Raisin Bran for breakfast and it was loaded with cockroaches. He proceeded to remove each roach with his hands, and then pour milk into the bowl with the now de-roached cereal and eat it. I freaked the frick out, and his dad came in and basically called me a little bee and then poured himself a bowl of roach bran and did the same thing. All you have to do is close the dang bag with a clothing pin or something. What the heck? A friend of mine, when I was about 7-8, mentioned to me that his dad had died because he forgot to wind down the windows on the car on a hot day. Flash forward 10 years later and I finally understood what really happened. My friend's family never finished their drinks. They always stopped drinking before it was empty. I never understood why and they would always avoid the question when I asked. The nightmares I had about those freaking cups, man. Why the frick didn't they just finish their drinks like normal human beings? They should get together with the family that pours their unused drinks back in the container. It was a blended family with 4 girls and 1 boy. The house had 3 rooms and a den that had doors on it. It could easily be a makeshift bedroom. They crammed all 4 girls into the smallest room and gave the boy his own room. Her stepdad worked the night shift, so he'd sleep in the den, which was right by the front door, and scream and occasionally beat her and her sisters with a belt for coming home from school and waking him up when he slept right next to the heavy front fricking door. She was instructed to play outside and not come in every day till 7-8 p.m. The issue is that we lived in Arizona where it is hot as frick, so these kids are out in 110 degree weather in the desert not allowed to cool off or get drinks. It was insane. I hated her house and always invited her and her little sister to my place, where we could play games in the AC and access the kitchen freely. When I was in 3rd grade there was this one girl who started having to leave the classroom every day at the same time to go outside to spit up. Yes, spit up, as she called it. The teacher was visibly annoyed the first few times she went outside and finally had a talk with her in the hallway. After the talk, from that day forward, she allowed this girl to go outside to spit up without questioning it. When I asked her about it, she just said she had an upset stomach and that was it. Now that is when things started to get really weird. After a few days one of the other girls in class started spitting up also, then another and another until all the girls, about 12 in all, started going outside to spit up at exactly the same time every day. The teacher acted like nothing strange was going on. After about a month of this it suddenly stopped like nothing had ever taken place. I am 54 years old and I remember this like it was yesterday. I still don't know what happened. I just figured it was some kind of mass hysteria. Update. The 22nd of September 2014. I've talked to a few people about this and here is the best explanation. I remember at around that time getting vaccinated for smallpox. I remember because they used an air gun that looked like a ray gun to inject the vaccine into our arms. I thought it was cool but it did hurt a little. Anyway, there was a side effect of the vaccine that caused a condition known as lymphadenopathy. This would cause your lymph nodes to swell and make you feel like you needed to spit all the time. That's probably what happened to the original girl. As for the rest of the girls, I don't know. They may all have had the same thing or it could have been the mass hysteria effect since the original girl was sort of alpha. None of the boys that I know of experienced the same thing although I did have a lymph node infection a few years later which was cured by antibiotics. This is the best explanation so far. Other theories put forth in this thread, does not seem likely since we were all around 8 years old. Bulimia. Possible. But I don't remember any of them having any problems other than this short incident. Getting out of class. Definitely probable. I asked my mother and she guessed dental problems. I asked my brother-in-law, doctor of infectious disease specialist, and he gave the best answer. If I ever get in touch with any of these people, I'll report their interpretation of it all. That's all for now. You have got to figure this one out. Find old classmates on Facebook or something. I have to know. This is kind of mild, but was a WTF moment when I was a kid. My best friend's family invited me to stay for dinner one night when I was around age 11 or 12. We sit down to dinner and I asked if I could please have some milk or water with my meal. No one was allowed to drink anything while eating their meals. They all had to wait until their plates were clean before they could get a drink. WTF. But, I'm thirsty. She remained my best friend for years, but I never ate dinner at her house again. They also had 9 cats, one of which had a litter of 6 kittens. Looking back, it is amazing that they didn't have 100 cats, because none of them were fixed. They were concerned what the other cats would do to the kittens, which is understandable. So, they kept the kittens in my friend's bedroom. This was probably not so unusual at first, but 2 years later and these kittens, now cats, had never left my friend's bedroom. Never. My friend actually moved up to the attic when her older brother moved out, because everything she owned smelled like cat pee and she was embarrassed. Basically, she had to give up her room so that her family could keep 6 cats hostage in there. I had a neighbor growing up whose parents were just the sketchiest people I've ever met. The mom would spend an hour every time before she got in the car wiping everything down with baby wipes and then cleaning her hands with hand sanitizer. But whenever I'd go in the house, which would be rare, it'd be so gross. Layers of dirt on the floors and cabinets, old fast food bags and cups all over the place, wet dog smell lingering. It was just bad. She'd always invite me to play at her house, but I'd always say fuck no. I had a co-worker like that. She's obsessively clean at the office and is always organizing things and throwing stuff out. When I finally went to her apartment, I was shocked to see how filthy it was. It felt like everything I thought I knew about her was a lie. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.